We are joined today by Matt Barone. He is a programmer for the Tribeca Film Festival Midnight section. Matt, how's it going with you today?
I'm good. I'm doing well. It's a couple weeks away from the festival, so it's sort of the calm before the good storm, where everything kind of
Yeah.
starts. It's a little bit of quiet down period. Everything's programmed, everything's locked in now. We're just crossing T's and dotting I's, and then a couple weeks it ramps up again.
Now, I sort of gave you an introduction, but can you do me a favor and properly introduce yourself to Dread Central?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Matt Barone. I am associate programmer for Tribeca Festival, specializing in the genre content, which means I program the Midnight section. And I'm also outside of Tribeca. I'm also the director of programming for the Brooklyn Horror Film Festival, which once Tribeca ends, I switch over into that mode. But right now, I'm fully immersed in Tribeca. So yeah, I
Cool.
program the genre film, Tribeca.
What got you into horror? Was there a movie that really messed you up as a kid or a couple of
Oh yeah,
them?
a million of them. Yeah. So my dad, when I was a little kid, I was maybe, like in the 5 or 6 range. My dad introduced me to the Universal monster movies, so I watched all of them through him. The Wolfman's the one that really kind of locked in with me and really, messed me up, and that got me into it. And then my dad was a huge Abbott and Costello fan, so he then showed me Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. So that became like my dad and I's like film to watch together all the time, and that set it in motion. And then from there, I just kind of ran wild with it. The first film that truly messed me up was Night of the Living Dead, and I saw that maybe at like 8 or 9. When I wasn't
Yeah.
supposed to, I snuck a copy, my VHS copy my aunt had, and I watched it like at a family party downstairs. Nobody knew I was watching it, and I just like my mind was just like, and
Yeah.
from there, it just was a complete like I was asking for back issues of Fangoria as a 9-year-old kid, and so it's been a lifelong thing, and I've been sort of fortunate enough to find ways to make it work for me professionally too. So
Cool.
can't complain. Yeah.
What do you think it was about Night of the Living Dead that really like disrupted your childhood worldview?
Yeah, I thought about this as like at the time when I was like 8 or 9. Obviously, I wasn't sort of in tune with like the social commentary and the kind of deeper layers of it. I picked up on that later. For me,
Mhm.
it was because Universal monster movies they're scary, obviously. Especially if you were around in like in the 30s and 20s when they came out, you would have really probably lost your mind. But I was just taken by them, but I wasn't like scared by them. Night of the Living Dead was the first movie I saw where like just the bleakness of it, the kind of just like the crushing darkness and heaviness of it, and I remember being a kid and sort of being like devastated when Ben dies in the end. Spoiler
Yeah.
alert for anybody. I'm sure everybody watching this has seen Living Dead. But yeah, so like as a kid that affected me, and I think there was just a kind of just the like I said, just the bleakness and heaviness and darkness of it really kind of affected me in a way I hadn't seen prior to that in horror. And I think that speaks to like to this day, I love all genre, I love all kinds of horror, but like the ones I get the most excited for tend to be the bleakest and the kind of like the sort of the most punishing and the kind of like the like my favorite Rob Zombie film is Lords of Salem, so like that kind of thing. But also like, I love there's a Spanish movie called Kidnapped from like in the 2007 2008 range, and I
Yeah.
put people onto that, and that last shot where it's just like the close up of the girl, and it's just like, that I just for some reason the bleaker the more kind of punishing a film is, I respond to it more. So I think that kind of goes back to my being a kid, Night of the Living Dead, sort of leaving an impression on me. That still kind of carries through to today, I think.
That's funny. We were just working on a list of like the top 10 most disturbing movies of all time,
Yeah.
and Kidnapped is on it.
It's so
So,
good, right? Yeah, and it's so good, and it's so like people don't talk about it enough. So I'm glad that you guys showed love to it like that. I mean, I've
yeah,
showed it to friends before, and they're like, they don't get it. They don't like. It's just like a very specific kind of viewer I think clicks into that movie and really appreciates what it's doing because yeah, that's just a bleak ass movie, man. That's yeah. So I love that kind of horror that sort of the release valve comedy sort of moments are good. Obviously, those always work, but you know I don't mind a film that just has no intention of making you smile at all. It's really trying to just mess you up like that. I appreciate the kind of go for broke of that kind of film.
yeah, we love that at Dread Central. We're
Yeah,
always making lists of like the most messed up movies of all time, stuff like that. We
those are the
eat
most
that
fun to
up.
show people too, right? Those are the ones that like, you can have a good time and have some drinks and food and watch like a horror comedy, Evil Dead or whatever, and that's great. But I love like I had a night where my friends used to always invite me over on Fridays to show, bring DVDs. So I would like this was the era of like the French Extreme. So I brought over Martyrs. I brought over Inside. I brought over High Tension. I brought over then what, which all messed them up. One of my friends called me the next day after Martyrs and like mad at me about it. And
You
then
can't show that to a newbie. You
it
cannot.
was a group of newbies, even worse. And then another night, I did that with Irreversible, which is probably one of the thing I regret of my movie sort of fandom moment was putting my friends in front of Irreversible, unknowing, not knowing what they were doing. Like they had no clue
Uh,
what it was. from the like the Club Rectum stuff in the beginning. I kept looking at them and they just had no idea. Then obviously the
Mhm.
centerpiece of that film was just, it was a bad idea on my part, but that's sort of been my MO. My friends, they come to me when they want to like see some crazy stuff.
Hey, it's a good education for them either way.
Yeah.
Do you, when your love of like bleak, dark horror, does that bleed into how you program horror movies at Tribeca?
Yeah, for sure. When you're programming, it's interesting because you don't want to like have. So for Tribeca this year, the program's expanded with the retro films we have, and
Hmm.
and so. But generally, it's 5 midnights. It's been traditionally. So with 5 films, you don't want to just have 5 bleak films because you want to have. So when you're programming a festival, even for Brooklyn Horror, is the same thing. You don't want to just kind of focus on one specific type of style or tone. But yeah, for sure. I mean, I do think that I always try to, at least on my end, because with Tribeca, I'm sort of the lead guy, but there's a committee aspect to it too. So there's like if I like a film a lot, I recommend it to other people. We talk about it as a group. So there's certain films that I love a lot that may not get fully through, but
Hmm.
I do tend to champion a lot of the films I tend to champion are the sort of darker, heavier, bleaker ones. So there does tend to, at least every year, there's like one or two that fall into that space.
Hmm.
Because but you also, when you're programming, you also want to have, okay, so you have that kind of style. You also want to have something that's a little bit lighter, maybe, or something that's more of a crowd pleaser. You kind of want to be able to sort of run the gamut in a section, just to kind of have a diversity, and b have something for everybody. Because not
Hmm.
everybody loves to be like traumatized at the movie. They want to get to the edge of that, but then like
Yeah.
have a little fun. They don't want to like leave the theater and question humanity and stuff all the time. So.
What are a title or two from this year's Midnight Showcase you're really excited for audiences to witness?
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's to piggyback off the conversation we've been having, the one film of this year's lineup that falls into this sort of disturbing punishing is Family Dinner. It's
Hmm.
a film from Austria. It's a first time director named Peter Hengel. One of the producers is Ant Timpson, who directed Come to Daddy. He was part of the whole production team behind ABCs of Death. He's sort of an OG veteran in the genre space. It's super bleak. It's about this overweight teenage girl who is desperate to start losing weight, and her aunt is a famous nutritionist. Her aunt's published like nutrition books and self help guides and stuff. So she decides on Easter weekend, she decides to go spend the weekend with her aunt and her aunt's family, in hopes that her aunt's going to kind of like give her a diet routine and get her sort of more healthy. And she very kind of gradually realizes that there's something else going on with the aunt. There's something else going on with this kind of diet regimen she has. And yeah, I always gotta be careful when I talk about movies because I don't want to say too much. So I'll kind of leave it there plot wise.
Uh,
But the
yeah.
film that like when it got sent to us to consider, the film that was cited by the producers was Good Night Mommy, and it's pretty spot on comparison in terms of just not so much the story, because this film Family Dinner is a little less like impenetrable than Good Night Mommy. It's a little bit more, I want to say accessible, but it's not as like
Yeah.
slow, and it's a little bit more of a crowd element to it, but it has that same kind of just like icy, methodical kind of bleak vibe to it. I love that one, and something that's notable about that movie too that I kind of realized in the sort of process after we programmed it was that, I mean, you're a huge horror fan too, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like there really hasn't been a great Easter horror film, right? Like I feel like it's like the one holiday that's sort of been kind of neglected on like there's like the Killer Bunny movies, and there's other there's
They're
stuff
out
out
there,
there.
but they're bad. We talk about this every year at Dread Central because it's hard to exploit Easter because the movies aren't out there.
Yeah, so there you go. So this is, I've kind of put the stamp on it, at least from my own sort of advocating, is that this is the first truly great Easter horror film.
I
It's
mean,
set on
yeah.
Easter weekend. Easter is kind of a theme of it in terms of like having like an Easter dinner with a family and all that. So it's very much an Easter horror film. The only other thing that like I've ever really loved in terms of Easter is that segment in Holidays, the Nicholas McCarthy
Oh,
Easter.
it's so good.
Yeah,
It's
like
so
that's
good.
like been the only thing that.
Okay, what about Critters 2?
Oh, it's a fun movie, yeah, for sure. Like that's what I'm saying. There's movies out there
Yeah.
that that fall into the category, but like I don't know this. I guess so. Critters
Hmm.
2 can occupy the kind of like fun space, right? But
Uh,
this is the first like just real kind of like go for your throat, um, just like beautifully crafted, like great performances, and yeah. So I think that's gonna be a standout in the lineup.
I can't wait for that one. Another one I'm really excited for. Uh, I'm gay and I'm Jewish, and so attachment
Yeah,
seems to really be calling out to me. Can you talk
yeah,
a little bit about that title?
yeah, for sure. I love Attachment. Attachment. So that is about, there's these two women who have so it starts off in like a rom-com space where like these two women have this kind of like random meet cute, like a literal like kind of a meet cute scene in
Yeah.
a bookstore. They start dating, they start falling in love with each other, but one of them starts kind of showing signs of maybe having something wrong. She has a seizure. She kind of seems like a little bit something is off. So her mother, and she comes from a very devout religious mom, religious Jewish mother.
Yeah.
So the mother finds out about her having this sort of episode and wants her to come home for a weekend so she can, help out and take care of her. But she wants to bring her new girlfriend with her. So the two of them go to the one girl's mom's house and stay there for the weekend. And as they're there, you sort of take the POV of the girl who's not sick, so you're taking her POV and you're sort of seeing that like, there's something, is the mother kind of doing something to the daughter? Is there something sort of sinister going on here? Why are there all these kind of weird sort of mythological symbols around? Why is there a rabbi kind of like sort of following my every move? So it sort of plays in. So the first like hour, the first hour, you're kind of in this like rom-com space that gradually gets darker and darker and darker and darker until you get to the third act. Then it goes into full on horror that's sort of very steeped in like very specific Jewish sort of horror mythology, like classic tropes and sort of legends,
Yeah.
stuff like that. It's really good though. The thing I love about it is that you love these two characters so much that the actresses' chemistry is like amazing. Yeah, so like by the time, by 45 minutes into it, I'd forgotten that I was watching something that was submitted as a horror film. I was like, oh, it's just like a great like romantic character piece that like I love these two people, and then you realize that that's the perfect way that once the stakes get raised, like you're like completely on their side rooting for them. So it's one of those horror movies where like you want good things to happen. Like you're not, so like as much as I love bleak horror, there are those films that you love the characters so much you're like, no, actually I want these people to win. I'm
Yeah.
hoping that they carry through. And so this is very much powered by the performances and the chemistry between the two leads. And it's an interesting look at like codependence in a relationship and sort of what does that mean when you're in a codependent relationship, but your partner is in a codependent relationship with her parent, and her parent is deeply religious, and you're in a same-sex relationship. There's a lot of layers going on in that. But so there's
Yeah.
all that kind of deep stuff going on within a kind of accessible, sort of entertaining and fun movie. I'm really glad that Shudder already has it. So yeah, so after we show it, Shudder eventually will play it on their service, and we'll get more eyes. But I'm a big fan of it. I think it's been in the last few years, as I'm sure your site covers. There's been a really kind of just exciting, strong surge of queer horror,
Hmm.
sort of voices. And for me, this is one of the better films in that sort of lane that I've seen in the last few years. I think it's really strong.
Yeah, I think it might be the one I'm most excited about. Another one that I'm psyched for, which I haven't seen yet, is The Black Phone.
Oh, you haven't seen it?
So
Oh,
I haven't seen it,
so
yeah.
good, man.
But I'm a huge fan of Joe Hill.
Sure.
So I've read 20th Century Ghosts, so I'm ready for it. Are
Yeah.
you a Joe Hill? Are you familiar with Joe Hill?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I read 20th Century Ghosts back when it came out. I've
Whoa.
read most of his novels. The only one I haven't read, what's the most recent one? The Fireman.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I haven't read
massive.
that one. It's good.
It's good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah, I haven't
Yeah.
gotten to that one yet, but I've read everything else of his. And yeah, the Black Phone is great, man. I saw that when Fantastic Fest premiered it last September. So it's been a long road with that film, and I'm glad that we get to host its New York premiere right before it gets the full release. But
Yeah.
it's great. I mean, if you're a fan of Sinister, it's Cargill and Scott Derrickson back in that zone.
Mhm.
But more of a crowd pleaser than Sinister. I mean, Sinister's a crowd pleaser for a specific kind of crowd like me and
Oof.
you and people that
Yeah.
love that.
It's
But
hard
Black
though.
Black Phone play like it's a summer event horror movie, which is always like like I don't know if it came out in the summer, but like that kind of like big studio.
Yeah.
Everybody's excited about it. Everybody wants to see it. You're gonna have full audiences when you see it. It delivers on that way, but it's just like it's really mean. The Ethan Hawke is like incredible. Like you literally never seen him like this before, and he's like fully bad. Like there's not like there's not a scene where he's like debating whether he's doing the right thing. That he's like full on like evil incarnate type of
Yeah.
character. The masks that Tom Savini did are all really badass. The lead kid is great. The kid who plays the one who's kidnapped, he's a character that's his younger sister that's like trying to like basically lead the police investigation, and she's a very kind of precocious, sort of like witty, charming sort of character. She's a breakout, so it's just it doesn't suffer from like bad kid performances, what a lot of these movies tend to sometimes fall into. Like the
Oh
kids are
yeah.
great. Ethan Hawke is great in a role you've never seen him in before. It has this really badass sort of opening credit sequence that's kind of in like the 7 opening credit sequence lane, where as soon as it starts with this opening credit sequence, you know exactly what the tone's going to be, and you know what exactly they're going for, and you're going to be like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, no, they're not playing around. This is going to be like a brutal, bleak horror film, even though it's about kids. Like they're not going to pull any punches in this one. It's so good.
Are you getting any of the talent at the festival this year?
Yeah, as far as I know, don't hold me 100% to this. Like I know Scott, I'm pretty sure like Scott Derrickson and Cargill, I'm pretty sure will be there. I'm like 95% sure Ethan Hawke will be there. Don't or there's going to be a Q&A. There's going to be talent for sure. I don't have the exact list in front of me, but I'm pretty
Okay.
sure Ethan Hawke will be there and the filmmakers will be there. Some
Will
of
you
them.
help me one day? It doesn't have to be this festival. Get me an interview with Joe Hill. Just one day.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think it feels like if the sort of Hollywood trend spotting thing stays as we know it to be, like if this movie's a hit, I'm sure they're gonna mine all these books for stuff, right? So
They should.
you're gonna get make a 20th Century Ghost film. You might get all the other stories in that. You can get. I'm sure they're trying to make The Fireman already. They did that
Yeah.
Nosferatu TV show,
Yep.
Horns already. So yeah, I mean,
Heart
I'm sure
Shaped
he's worked.
Box. Have you read that one?
Yeah. Was there a movie about that?
I don't think so, but Rob Zombie should be in it.
Yeah, I think they were trying to make it. I think it was going to have Jeffrey Dean Morgan at one point, but it fell
Oh,
through.
cool.
Yeah,
That
I
would be
remember reading
good.
that in like the trades or something. But yeah, so I mean, he's got so much content that they're going to keep going to him. So yeah, you'll definitely have plenty of opportunities. I've never personally met him or interviewed him. I went to like a reading of his before, and like I've seen him in
Cool.
settings. And he's just like a really chill, low key guy. So I'm sure he would be down for
I've
whatever.
almost become more into his work than Stephen King in recent years for some
Yeah,
reason. I'm just such a big fan.
yeah. Oh, he's great. Yeah, you're gonna love the Black Phone. I mean,
Oh, I bet.
it's one
I
of those
bet.
kind of like surefire. That's one of the reasons why we wanted it. Because it's coming out the week after the festival, so there's an idea of like it's going to be released right after us. But like we had the opportunity for New York premiere, and it was like it's just a great movie. Like if you have the opportunity to show like an incredible movie like this, you got to take it, and especially if you get the talent there. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's gonna deliver. I think it's gonna be one of the better sort of horror films of the year, like at the end of the year list and stuff like that.
My last question for you
Yeah,
is there's like a sub series in Midnight where you're showing a bunch of like iconic trashy horror films that take place in New York City.
yeah,
And I'm wondering, do you have any favorite horror titles that take place in New York?
yeah. So many. You know what I like? I was recently rewatching. I went on this kind of Fulci kick, and I love how Fulci like he had this kind of sort of crazy, like really interesting fascination with New York City. Like to
Hmm.
where Zombie obviously ends on the Brooklyn Bridge, and
Hmm.
the New York. So the New York Ripper is one that I recently rewatched, and I just because I've been on kind of a giallo kick lately, and I kind of went back to all that kind of stuff, and the New York is so good. I just love the like. Have you seen the New York Ripper?
No.
Oh, you haven't? Okay. So yeah, it's it's a typical sort of New York City slasher, but it's like of that kind of really kind of seedy, grimy, brutal, Fulci vibe. So you're watching like a kind of a giallo slasher set in New York City, but like where the kills are how Fulci like zooms in on every last like agonizing moment of the kill. So it's like a super brutal slasher. But the interesting thing about it is the killer he makes Donald Duck noises when he kills. So he talks like
Whoa.
Donald Duck, and it's
Cool.
bizarre. It's super bizarre. Yeah, it's one of those movies where like you're wincing at what's going on, but you're laughing. Like I don't know if I can curse, but like it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
okay, whose fucking idea? Like what's the craziest? Like like where the hell do you think they have the guy make Donald Duck noises? It's kind of
Yeah.
like when you watch like I revisited Spookies recently. Have you seen Spookies?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
The incredible masterpiece. I saw that as a kid. My dad and I found a VHS of that at Kmart and just bought it
Perfect.
blindly and watched it. And had like the best time, and we watched it every year for Halloween. But anyway, so I rewatched that recently. Like the like lust crazed muckmen in the basement that have like the farting noises. It's
So
like
weird.
it's like when you're watching that kind of thing and you're just like, who the hell allowed this to happen? Why is this here? But it's also incredible, and I'm glad it's here. Like that's what the New York Ripper
Hmm.
has this like Donald Duck element that's like so fucking
I
bizarre.
love that. I think that was from the same producer of Street Trash, which also is like, how did you think
Yeah,
of
that's
that?
another great one. Chud, I'm a Chud fan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, New York City. I live in New Jersey, so I'm also like, so New York is like my closest way to kind of tap into local horror because other in Jersey we have obviously like Friday the 13th, but Alice Sweet Alice was shot in Patterson, which is the town next to where I live. So like that's like my claim to fame kind of. But
Hmm.
yeah, so New York horror has always been kind of a cool thing for me, just because it's like the closest I can get to having like local. I can bring people to like oh, this was where Rosemary's Baby was shot. And this is where the Ghostbusters, by the Tribeca office, actually, the Ghostbusters firehouse is like a couple blocks away from it. So that's like a cool
Cool.
thing. But yeah, so there's a bunch of them. But New York Ripper is one that I think people should experience just for the Donald Duck element of it alone, because it's like just makes no sense at all, but it's incredible.
So when does Tribeca start this year? When can we expect to start seeing movies?
Yeah, so the festival, the opening night is June 8th. Opening night, that's like the literal opening night. That's just a documentary about Jennifer Lopez called Halftime. So that's one screening on opening night. But then Thursday, June 9th is when like the mass screenings throughout the day begin. So other than opening night, so Thursday, June 9th. So our first midnight, so we're doing the midnights one premiere per night for the first 4 days. So Thursday, June 9th is Hugh Sarah, which we haven't talked about yet, but that's one of our midnights from Mexico. Really good, really kind of good, like Rosemary's Baby sort of psychological horror about a
Uh,
woman who's a first time mother and she's kind of going through like the anxieties of motherhood all while being haunted by something. Um, that's Thursday. Then Friday is family dinner. Then Saturday the 11th is Travis Stevens' A Wounded Fawn, which is bonkers. If you're a Travis Stevens film fan, this is him taking the biggest swings he's taken yet, and it's completely insane. I love it. So yeah, so to answer your question, June 9th, June 8th is the opening night. It ends on June 19th, the following Sunday. Black Phone plays on, I believe, June 18th, that last Saturday night.
yeah.
Um, and then there's screenings throughout all day. All the films will have multiple screenings, so there'll be like 2 or 3 screenings per film. So if you can't make a premiere, you can catch the subsequent screenings. And then there's also an online element. Some of the films will be screening online. Not all of them will be. It's up to the filmmaker's discretion. I know A Wounded Fawn and Attachment are both having virtual screenings in terms of the midnight section. So
Cool.
if you're not in New York City, you can't make a screening, you want to catch those two specifically, you can buy virtual tickets for those.
Awesome.
Uh,
Well, I'm going to be there in person, so I cannot wait to catch all of these in
yeah,
theaters.
for sure.
That's
Say
going
hi.
to
Yeah,
be
say
great.
hi when you're there. I'll be out doing Q&As and intros. I'll be running around and stuff.
I
So
absolutely will. If you so wish, where could people find you on the internet?
yeah, sure. I have a Twitter account at M Barone, and I'm on Instagram. I forget what my Instagram account is. I'm not as active on Instagram. It's
Yeah.
like Matt Barone 82. I was born in 82, so it could be
Uh,
that. But Twitter is the main thing I use. So at
same.
M Barone, and yeah. And then if you're around in New York City in October, keep an eye out for Brooklyn Horror because we'll be doing that once Tribeca ends. I'll be switched over to that. But for now, hopefully people can make it to Tribeca. And yeah, if you want to ask me about films, ask me about the films on social media. I can talk for hours about these films, so I'm always happy to do it.
Sweet. Well, thank you for chatting with us today, and we cannot wait for the festival.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you taking the time, man.
Yeah.
Have a good one.